The Tang Dynasty, Xian, has been running here since 1988, every night. We're making a long walk to see the warriors of Xian, a site that's become one of China's major destinations, bringing in millions of tourists every year. I don't know how our guide's going to keep track of all 18 of us in this mess, but we'll see what happens.
They all had bronze weapons. The English with crossbows, arrows, arrowhead spears, dagger axes, halberds, teeth, swords, and curved knives. Lord in heaven, look at boom, 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 boom. Or you can do it that way. But one that I saw a drum and then a chair. The revolutionaries did the
내가 무토산이 그래. 어디 진짜?拿着好物件，我全部这也是原件。
That's what they use.
That's what they use the bricks for. Yes.
Now we go to look at the movie, of which I will only show you a tiny fragment, I think.
He ascended the throne at the age of 13. In 210 BC, Emperor Xian died suddenly on an inspection tour, and
finding the movie, all these other copied warriors. Presumably you can buy them and take them home. I think there even are miniature ones. I'll go take a look. The party has been given 2 hours before it needs to reassemble. So first of all I'll look in here, and then over there. 2 hours should be ample. Well, what we have here is more excavated pits that things were found in, either soldiers, either warriors or cavalry or something like that, but there's nothing in here at the moment. And these enormous exhibition halls were constructed around the actual pits once they'd been dug. This is shows construction. And that presumably is what it was before they started digging. Bits and remains and things. And I remember seeing the fire, how the rebels destroyed the tomb and mashed up many of the soldiers. So what we saw at first in the big room was what they reconstructed from what was left. Some of them were okay, and others needed repairing. Restoring, and all windows around have a kind of metal relief of ancient chariot and horses. So final is this, which I think is the museum. Of course it's ironic but true, but a poster of some of the vessels they unearthed look much clearer on camera than the actual things themselves. But this is the Qin dynasty. I think it was 2,300 years ago. I'll check that. French magazine cover, Les Guerriers de l'Eternité. Even I can translate that. The glorious world of the Terracotta Warriors. It's an expedition. It's an exposition of work by this man, Xian Wan. Sorry, Xian Wan. That's his name. And this is his work. But I think we'll get downstairs into the museum itself. I have to presume that this is all work from that dynasty. Rather dramatically laid out in a big patchwork mural on the wall. Jade has been the symbol of both political power and material wealth, and the Qin people lived in this valley for centuries.
它的这个马呢都是匹马的，腿部呢是实心的，这个胸部马身呢是个方形的，这个呢取的名字叫做立车，也叫做高车。
This is how they found them, lying in those channels of sand and mud. This was the chariot driver. This in bronze was part of the harness of the horse. Well, needless to say, the crowds everywhere being horrendous, once you get in the museum, you find all those groups, say 40 or 50 people sometimes, following a guy with a flag, and they all gather around one case showing some exhibit simultaneously, so you can't get within a mile of it. You have to wait until they all move aside and take a look. But some of the stuff is rather remarkable, and it certainly is a hell of a lot of an improvement over looking at temples and palaces and so on, all of which sort of basically look alike and involve a lot of walking around but don't offer much else. Anyway, the Qin people, Q-I-N, no U needed, the traces of them were 1,000 years before Christ, sort of in this area, in this valley. But then about 250 BC, this guy came along, and he became a king, or he was a king. He was maybe born as a king, and he unified China to a very large extent, and he sort of moderated, I can't think of the right word, weights and measures and things like that, unified them to some extent, and did a lot of good stuff, set up a good bureaucratic system to organize things. He also had a lot of slaves build him a palace, and he was not a warm-hearted guy, but he was a very clever man, and he called himself Qin, I think, let's see, Qin Shi Huang means basically emperor, and he was like the first emperor of Japan. He also was one of the first, if not the first, to start the Great Wall. And when he died, this is how his tomb was built by so many people, and had all those warriors made and placed in it. And I think that before I tell you a final bit about him and the warriors, what we'll do is we'll go and take a final look at the warriors, the ones we saw earlier lined up, and then I'll sit down and tell you a bit more about the whole thing. Even when he became king, when he was still in his teens, and in fact the first emperor, he was already thinking of the afterlife, and he was thinking, well, this great kingdom that he ruled over now, what a pity he couldn't take it to heaven with him. So he started his workers building this enormous mausoleum, and it's estimated that 700,000 people worked on it in the course of his life. He died 38 years later, and the mausoleum was still not quite finished even then. And here were all these terracotta warriors, which were going to be his army, which would accompany him to heaven. And when he died, his rival, one of them at least, wrecked the place and burned the tombs and destroyed a lot of the warriors, as you saw in that little bit of film we saw. And but after that, basically the whole thing lay hidden and unknown for centuries until 1974. 1918 actually, some farmer was digging a well and he found one of the figures, and he thought it was a strange figure but didn't do very much about it. And then when he found later on that the well was dry, he figured the figure must have drunk it all, so he broke it up, broke up that particular warrior. Some of this huge area is yet to be excavated, but one of the things discovered was like the first brick wall. The oldest brick wall known in China was around part of the warriors. There was something like 8,000 figures unearthed altogether, mass sculpture indeed. Some were horses, of course, some were men, and there were also an enormous amount of weapons, swords and crossbows and lances and other ancient weapons made of either bronze or iron, all of which I suppose are stored in some museum or other. And when the way they look now, which is sort of brownish, was not actually the way they were originally. In fact, the way they were originally, I'll turn this camera around and show you, because I have a picture in a book. Bright colours they all were in. Of course, the colours have faded since. And of course they were made in moulds and then in separate parts actually, which were fitted together. The heads, for example, are usually made in two parts at least, and then the whole thing was fitted together, and they were baked and painted. And once they were in place, they were all covered over and remained hidden for centuries. Okay, well that's about it for here. Today is our only day, and we arrived yesterday in Xian, this place, and we're leaving very early in the morning for Shanghai. I don't know how many of these shows you're watching, but I estimate there'll be about 6 shows about China, my first visit. There'll be at least 2 shows on Beijing, at least 1, maybe 2 shows on Shanghai, and a show on this one on Xian. So I hope you watch all of them. I will repeat them at some point, so you might catch them someday. Give me a call if you want to know when some are going to be on. I'm in the phone book.